Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Get ready for the hottest DPS showdown yet, as we compare 3 of the best Pyro DPS characters in Genshin Impact, at both Constellation 0 and Constellation 6. Yeah, you heard me right. This DPS showdown will include comparisons at both free-to-play achievable Constellation 0 builds and Constellation 6 gambling addict builds. Between the 3 most requested, based on a poll that I gave to you guys, 5-star Pyro DPS characters Arlecchino, Hu Tao, and Lyney. And in case you missed it, I participated in the highest stakes Genshin Impact tournament, the Galaxy Battles Genshin Impact. It was an epic battle of wits, luck, and shenanigans as we all battled for $40,000 worth of prizes. Thank you Samsung Galaxy for sponsoring this video and inviting me to participate. Going into this competition, I had won one of the preliminary rounds and earned our team a 2x point booster for the finals. As part of the team Inazuma Innovators, we had to innovate all over the place as we fought bosses with a full team of travelers and dealt with countless hijinks, all while gaming on the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Throughout the entire tournament, I forgot I was even playing on a phone thanks to how well the phone can run Genshin Impact. And this is even in co-op, where 4 players make the game extra chaotic. Anyway, our team had a slow start as we were stuck in boss domains, still we did not give up hope and quickly closed the gap. And we ended up actually leading for a little bit. It ended up being neck and neck, and we came in second place. And coming in second place, we actually won you guys some prizes, $475 plus a Galaxy S24 Ultra, because your boy here won the biggest damage per thumbnail in the tournament. Speaking of the S24 Ultra, and the note assist with Galaxy AI is a powerful time saver, able to instantly summarize your notes, reformat them, and even translate them, all with the power of AI. Check out the link below to play like a pro and to learn more about the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. There are 11 showdowns across the board, and with 3 characters and 3 to 5 runs for each showdown, well, you can see why it took me around a week to crank out this video. So I'd really appreciate it if you gently press that like button while you're here. I also had the help of 2 guest speedrunners, Isilis and DHCWSP. This video wouldn't have been possible to make in just a week without them, so do check them out down below. Anyway, light my pants on fire because there are some tiny caveats. My account has Constellation 6 Hu Tao, but fortunately her later constellations are older than most of her clients. As such, it's quite easy to simulate a quote-unquote Constellation 0 Hu Tao's performance. For the Constellation 0 showdowns, I also stick with free-to-play friendly weapons, so no signature 5-star weapons allowed. Also for the lower budget builds, I think it's also important to reintroduce damage potentials, as this will allow me to attempt to normalize their builds relative to each other. My goal was to keep everyone at around 80% damage potential. For my Constellation 0 Arlecchino build, she'll be reaping the competition with the white tassel and the 4-piece gladiators. Her talents are at a measly 8, 6, and 7. So I'll be using Child on her party for some of the showcases, as well as a small bit of food to heat her up to around 80% damage potential. Since her talents are so underleveled and she doesn't even have access to her signature artifact set, we need to go through these motions in order to bring up her damage. Next up, we have our Coffin Salesman Hu Tao, my quote-unquote Constellation 0 build. For raw pyro damage is the 4-piece Shimenawas with the white tassel, as the white tassel is the most reasonable free-to-play friendly option that I could come up with for a raw pyro build. For her vape build, she'll be using the Dragon's Bane at Refinement 5 and the 4-piece Crimson Witch. Funnily enough, I have to equip incorrect main stats for some of my quote-unquote Constellation 0 Hu Tao builds to lower her damage potential to be similar to Arlecchino's. Hoyoverse, why can we still not toggle constellations 3 years later? Next we have the Cat Hat enthusiast Lyney. My Constellation 0 Lyney is using the 4-piece Marichosity Hunter, along with that one Fontanian craftable bow that does stuff, and his talents are triple crowned. As for their Constellation 6 builds, they're all using their signature weapons at Refinement 5. Damage potentials are less important at Constellation 6 since it's mainly just for a fabulous show, and the goal is to blow things up as fabulously as possible. As such, we just built our characters to meet the demands of each situation. And without further ado, it's time for everyone's favorite parts of the video, the disclaimers. All the runs in this video can be improved. We simply did each of these runs a few times and picked the best time for each of the situations. We're not here to grind infinitely just to save a few frames to a few seconds. Each of these runs were done to the best of our abilities and problem solving within a reasonable amount of time. It's simply an anecdotal comparison between these characters at our level of investment. It is not an accurate reflection of their power levels at all levels of investment. Just because character A is better than character B in a specific scenario does not mean that character A is better than character B. Please take everything with a giant grain of salt. Also, the times displayed on the screen are in frames, which are 1/60th of a second each, although sometimes I'll read the times out as decimals. Let's start off with our free-to-play friendly, more relatable Constellation Zero setups against our first victim, volunteer, the iceberg lettuce. For these Constellation Zero showcases, I allow reasonable mechanics to be implemented, such as Hu Tao being under 50% HP. Her raw pyro damage isn't what she's known for, and she's also stuck using a 3-star polearm as her best option for a raw pyro build. Still, she's able to effortlessly cook our salad, albeit suspiciously, in just 6.57 seconds. As for Lyney, well, he was a bit faster than Hu Tao for this, being much more suitable for pure pyro damage. After a quick combo, our local magician made the Registine disappear in 5.17 seconds. Lastly, we have Constellation Zero Arlecchino. I think tagging the Registine with her skill before the fight is very reasonable here, similar to how Hu Tao was allowed to be under 50% HP, since we need to spend some time breaking the Registine's core anyway. Arlecchino has thicker multiplier shortly after gaining her Bond of Life, and she was a tad faster than Lyney here, being the best Constellation Zero solo salad chopper with a chopping time of 4.83 seconds. But wait, let's also see how these characters do with poor financial decisions, aka at Constellation 6 Refinement 5. For these Constellation 6 showcases, since they're meant to be showcases of these characters at their peak, I also allow some reasonable shenanigans, like bringing Hu Tao down to 25% of her HP to activate her Constellation 6. And well, the Registine is the newest customer for Hu Tao in just 2.82 seconds. As for the cat hat dispenser, he still needs to, well, dispense a cat hat, and all of his cat hat dispensing options do take a couple of seconds. However, the moment the cat hat comes out, with a quick tap of the E button, once again our tasty salad disappeared, this time in 2.45 seconds. Looking back on this, an aim shot would be slightly faster, but again, please refer to the disclaimers. Then we have Arlecchino. Since reasonable shenanigans are allowed, like lowering Hu Tao's health to 25%, I decided it was fair for Arlecchino to start this fight with 200 Bond of Life. With 2 simple tiny pokes, she cleaned out the Registine in just 0.93 seconds. The fastest time with these restrictions in any DPS Showdown, even beating my earlier Nouvellette time. Let's move on to a much juicier volunteer, the Robot Chicken, and starting with our Constellation Zero counterparts. Now this was surprisingly close for all 3 of our contestants. I dare say though that Hu Tao did actually benefit from her Constellation 2's additional Blood Blossom damage, as well as her slightly more damaging Elemental Burst from her Constellation 5. And it might have been the difference to allow her to barely 2-cycle the Robot Chicken here. Anyway, I'm not here to split hairs, again refer to the disclaimers, and I still think this is a reasonable showcase of a quote-unquote Constellation 0 Hu Tao's raw pyro damaging capabilities. You'll also notice that I've been using N3CA to quote-unquote simulate a Constellation 0 Hu Tao's gameplay. Hu Tao still had a very competitive 34.37 second clear time. As for our magical magician Lyney, at Constellation 0 he squeaked out the victory here. One major advantage Lyney has over the others is that he has no major downtime for his damage output, and he's able to just continuously output formidable charge shots. As such, he edged out the victory with a 28.5 second clear time. Then we have our Constellation 0 Arlecchino. Arlecchino actually does have downtime unlike Lyney, but even so, her raw pyro damage is excellent, and she was able to clear this in 30.25 seconds. I found N3 dashes to actually speed this up by just a tiny bit. Unfortunately, I haven't theory crafted this enough to determine if N3 dash cancels are optimal, but in this case, at least anecdotally, it was a bit faster than my other N6 attempts. She was able to comfortably 2-cycle our Robot Chicken friend, and landed in second place for this particular challenge right after her son, Lyney. Let's head back over to the Pyroing Money Club with our Constellation 6 Refinement 5 characters against the Robot Chicken. Fortunately, Hu Tao still deals enough raw pyro damage in a single rotation with the help of the funds from all the coffins she sold, and she's able to single cycle our Robot Chicken Volunteer. We can tell here that Hu Tao's Constellation 6 is a bit antiquated, but it still managed to get the job done here. And now we're talking. Lyney has some of the best whale scaling in the entire game. He's able to create 2 cat hats with his charge attack, create another with his burst, and then quickly blow up everything with his elemental skill. Lyney did an incredible job thanks to nearly $2,000 of magical props, earning him a 9.4 second standing ovation and landing him in second place. And Arlecchino is an absolute beast at Constellation 6, and with the ability to pre-stack some Bond of Life, well, our poor Robot Chicken doesn't stand a chance. By activating her Constellation 2 Explosion and dash cancelling, this saves me some frames to then output 2 N3s to discipline our Robot Chicken in just 8.95 seconds. Another victory for Constellation 6 Arlecchino. And ping-ponging back to our free-to-play friendly counterparts, the next Constellation 0 Showdown is, what if we add a single teammate to each of them? Finally, we're able to utilize the thing that makes Constellation 0 Hu Tao so strong, the fact that she has no ICD on her charged attack. Pair her with her trusty Water Boy, and with a hop, skip, and many jump cancels, Hu Tao actually clutched victory for this event. After a rough start with the earlier raw pyro damage showcases, Hu Tao is able to do what she does best, which is to slap on the Dragon's Bane and to vapor enemies into becoming loyal customers in just 16.97 seconds. As for Constellation 0 Lyney, well, while Bennett is arguably his best teammate, Bennett is not as good when Lyney is using the free-to-play friendly Song of Stillness bow. The Song of Stillness oversaturates Lyney with attack, so yeah, Lyney still did save 7 seconds off his solo time thanks to the actual Pyro Archon, Bennett. Lastly, we have Constellation 0 Arlecchino. While not harnessing any reactions for the showcase, her raw pyro damage allowed her to still be quite competitive here, with a very solid 19.45 second clear time. Thanks to using the white tassel, Bennett's flat attack buff is incredibly valuable for her, and allows her to output some very hot damage, despite the lack of reactions. And in case you haven't deciphered the pattern now, well, we're going back to our Constellation 6 counterparts, and this time against a two-phased boss fight, the Kagumenki. This example perfectly highlights Constellation 6 Hu Tao's biggest weakness, her one pump chump syndrome. Because of her Constellation 6's 60-second cooldown, Hu Tao has to actually build crit rate and thus sacrifices a lot of raw damage. You also notice that I casted her skill super early here, so that way it'll come off cooldown sooner for Kagumenki's second phase. And I also had to pre-plan her HP to be just the right amount so that her second E will activate her Constellation 6. So yeah, a lot of shenanigans went into this. This is still though a very easy fight for Hu Tao, and she cleared this in 24 seconds. And this is where Constellation 6 Lyney truly shines. With just a bit of extra time thanks to Kagumenki's invincibility frames to set up cat hats, he's able to instantly glib first phase Kagumenki. And with the additional time to set up a couple cat hats for the second phase, this allows him to time his elemental skill perfectly to blow anything named Kagumenki up in just 17.28 seconds, and thus narrowly squeeze out the victory here even against his very intimidating father. Speaking of father, at Constellation 6 she has multiple options for disposing of the Kagumenki. Now I do think that if I had her signature artifact set, she could tie Lyney against the Kagumenki, but with the gladiators, I'm just short of a bit of damage from her burst one-shotting the second phase. Still, a simple charge attack dash cancel Constellation 2 activation N3 did the job just fine and cleared out the Kagumenki in 18.13 seconds. And we have one more Constellation 0 showcase, this one being a full team showcase against the Mushroom Chicken. Alright, I know that Constellation 0 Hu Tao got the best team going into this, but if I ran a different team, people would be upset that I didn't showcase Hu Tao's best team, so I decided to go with this team instead of alternate teams. Still, I seriously neutered both my Furina and Yelan's damage, and I also lowered my Shen Yuan's attack to around 2000 because of all the constellations I have on all these characters. And yes, this means that Hu Tao is gaining more fanfare and thus bonus damage from my Furina's Constellation 2. Still, I felt like it was necessary to show Hu Tao with one of her best teams, and one could argue that Constellation 3 Furina made it a bit more fair because Hu Tao couldn't start at under 50% HP. Anyway, I also went above and beyond and showcased her with a not quite as good team, the classic double Hydro Core with Yelan and Xingqiu. And it was notably slower here due to it just being shy of one cycling the Mushroom Chicken. As such, I've added a footnote to the chart with all of this in mind. As for Constellation 0 Lyney, interestingly, this fight was quite challenging for him, and it really demonstrates one of his biggest weaknesses: enemies attacking him. Why did I go with this team instead of with Zhongli? Well, because of the Abyssal Moon. If Lyney is the only one without Swirl, this would be a serious disadvantage, and running both Kazuha and Zhongli makes it difficult for Lyney to even two-cycle this thing. Despite these disadvantages, Lyney wasn't astronomically behind and still had a respectable 24.43 second clear time despite being slapped around by the chicken and constantly interrupted. Constellation 0 Arlecchino did incredibly well here with a mono Pyro team. Unlike Lyney, being a melee character who has very little opportunity cost for dashing, she's able to easily weave in and out of the chicken's attacks while also maximizing Xiangling's Pyronado damage. Frankly, if Hu Tao didn't have the advantages of multiple constellations on her 5-star supports, I can definitely see Arlecchino and Hu Tao being even closer in their clear times. Also, Arlecchino is very flexible, and if it wasn't for the Swirl Abyssal Moon buff requirement to keep it fair across all 3 teams, a Chevreuse overloaded team would have done excellently here as well. And we're back to our fellow oil barons with a full Constellation 6 team versus the Inquisitus Baptist. So why did I choose this random bloke in the middle of the desert for a full team showcase? This Inquisitor Baptist man starts off with 210% resistance to all elements, which effectively gives it around 3.9 million effective hit points. As we can see, the classic Constellation 6 Hu Tao plus Ayaka nuke combo is able to take care of this enormous effective health pool with just 2 charge attacks and Hu Tao's burst in 12.38 seconds. This setup was a bit convoluted to swirl everything necessary, but it's great to see such a classic combo still be able to output so much pain. As for Constellation 6 Lyney, well, this Furina combo worked wonders and allowed him to magically single cycle this behemoth of a health pool. How exactly does it work? Did any of it vape? Honestly, I'm not too sure, but I just copied my CN bros here. But I'm glad that it still single cycled it, only being a little slower than Hu Tao's clear time with a solid 13.87 second clear time. And boy oh boy, here we go. Constellation 6 Arlecchino's true power is being shown here. And she's able to set up some massive melts thanks to her Constellation 6. With just a single N1 poke, this gave her enough damage for her monstrosity of a burst to finish off this massive 3.9 million effective HP pool of a random bloke in the desert. FYI, her burst here has a 2,187% multiplier with 90% additional crit value at Constellation 6, which is absolutely bonkers. A dominating victory for this full team Constellation 6 Showdown. But wait, that's not all. We're breaking the pattern, and as always, we have a full Constellation 6 Abyss 12 run. I always love it when these runs come together. Thanks to the legendary mobile speedrunner DHCWSP, we have this incredible Constellation 6 Hu Tao plus Yelan run. According to DHCWSP, Chamber 1 can be 1 second faster and Chamber 2 probably 2 seconds faster. Admittedly, when it comes to continuous runs, Hu Tao always has a really slow start. Not being at under 50% HP with a 33% pyro damage bonus, and her Constellation 6 25% HP restriction is thus completely out of the question. Until she intentionally gets blown up by specters. Still, Constellation 6 Yelan is able to vape tons of stuff to death, giving Hu Tao the time she needs to get warmed up and nuke the second wave in 12-1-2. And 12-3-1 is the perfect opportunity for Constellation 6 Hu Tao to shine, where she's fully warmed up and she's able to output her stellar single target DPS to finish off this run. Huge thanks to DHCWSP for this very impressive Hu Tao run, as I wouldn't have been able to do this at all. As for my Constellation 6 Lyney run, well, it was very satisfying to just press E and for whatever is in front of him to instantly die. Due to a Hydro character basically being necessary for the top half of Biz 12, we need to run a partial Vate build, and it's crazy to see him just blow up all the husks with the flick of his hat. Now I'm certain I could have saved around 3 seconds on his run in total, but alas, still a wonderful showing for Lyney, and again, please refer to the disclaimers. And here we go with Icillus's Constellation 6 Arlecchino. Icillus is a legendary Eula speedrunner, and now I'm sure he's going to be a legendary Arlecchino speedrunner. Arlecchino is taking the speedrunning community by storm, as she effortlessly destroys multiple waves of enemies. Honestly, Icillus's run speaks for itself, as Arlecchino can choose to murder everything with her basic attacks or to one-shot 12-3-1 with her insane Constellation 6 burst. Constellation 6 Arlecchino's flexibility is just simply on another level. Who better to nuke with Arlecchino than Icillus, who is well known for his Eula nukes. So here are the results of both the quote-unquote Constellation 0 Showdown and the Constellation 6 Showdown. I find these results to be really interesting for many reasons. Firstly, I think all the characters at Constellation 0 were actually very comparable to each other. When added up, the time differences are small enough to be within a 10% margin of error. The game is interestingly quite well balanced in my opinion for Constellation 0 free-to-play players. However, once we add literally a single constellation to a character like Arlecchino, and let's not even mention signature weapons, or god forbid a second constellation, Arlecchino will really start to pull ahead. Hoyoverse has been avoiding power creep at the Constellation 0 free-to-play levels, but they're starting to seriously power creep early constellations as well as later constellations. By the time we hit Constellation 6, the gap is quite large, and Hu Tao's outdated constellations are really starting to show. What I find really interesting is how Lyney was also recently released, and him being at Constellation 6 is honestly a bit redundant with Constellation 6 Arlecchino. Arlecchino simply has more flexibility and more nuking potential at Constellation 6. Still, the gap isn't massive, and there will still likely be some situations where Constellation 6 Lyney can outperform his father. And if you can't tell, these DPS showdowns take me around an entire week to make, which is why I've kind of slowed down on making them. So if you like this video, I'd really appreciate a like, comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe as well. Also, please check out both Icillus's and DHCWSP's channels, as they are some of the best speedrunners out there and made this video possible. Huge thanks to everyone involved and to you for watching. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.